When you first think of North and South, what comes to mind?
Just the best time, the absolute end all of experiences, of friends, of locations, of costumes. I mean, it was just so wonderful and so surreal to be my age at the time was 25 and to have this incredible part. And I just feel so fortunate to have been a part of it. And I really can't believe that it's lasted this long and that there's still interest. It's 40 years. It's like, I'm only 35. How could that be?
And can you remember sort of getting the part and how it all came about?
Absolutely. I was waitressing in New York at this place called the Metropolitan Cafe, and I was flown out to California to test for a Joe Pesci pilot. And that night, it was me and Victoria Jackson who were testing. They tell you immediately after you test, you got it, you didn't get it, and she got it. And so as I was leaving, my managers called and said, "Will you pick up a script at Warner Brothers since you're right there?" It was nighttime and go in on this tomorrow. And I said, sure. I thought I'd pick up this little script. And I pick up a script that's like, this thick. And there was no way I was going to be able to read it. So I just took the scenes that I was supposed to audition with. And one was the one with Billy and the strawberries. And I can't remember the second one. And I just did what I wanted to do. And it was with the director and with Chuck McLean. And I was a little outrageous. I had like a lace top and then a top over it. I tried to look period as much as I could in contemporary clothing. And it kept falling, and my boobs kept coming out. So it kept falling, and finally I just said, "Oh, screw it, just leave it." And I kept reading. And by the time I was getting to my car, there was a call to go directly to costuming because they were going to test me. And it was the most exciting. And I tested for it and I went back to New York because they were taking their time making a decision. And I went back to waitressing and I was really depressed because I hadn't heard anything. And finally, after 3 weeks, I got a call from my managers that I got it. And I just remember crying, just weeping and calling my parents, just absolutely beyond overjoyed.
And the series was such a huge production, thousands of extras, thousands of costumes,
Yes,
established names, guest stars. Did it, you kind of touched on it there, but did it feel like a big deal at the time?
it did. I mean, I really wasn't aware of all the guest stars that were coming on, but as they showed up, I saw them and I was just blown away. And yeah, I knew it was a big deal. I knew that it was really special. We had such a connection, the cast, that it was really great.
And how aware were you of the books written by John Jakes? Is it sort of something you used for inspiration, or was it more a case of
Yes.
using the script?
Well, the script was very different than the book. I read the first one when I had time to read it, and I read the first one, and I got my idea of, I sort of knew how I wanted to play Ashton, but it gave you some insight, it gave you insight into relationships and things like that. So yes, I did use the first book.
And how did you find playing the character of Ashton? Because it's an integral sort of character to the show, a villain, and a character that I think the audience kind of loves to hate, really.
Hmm. It was it was just fun. I never remember it as being like, oh God, I have to go to work tomorrow. It was like the lines came easily. It was just one of those really freakish things. It was very easy to do. The schedule was great. The character was amazing. And there were some difficulties that I had to get through, which were, being a slave owner. Um, what was that like? What would that be like? And, that's a horrible thing. And, other stuff like that, trying to get over that because Ashton didn't concern herself with other people. So it was a great part. It was a fun, really fun part.
And what was it like to film on location and relive that time period with, as you kind of touched on, all of its complexities?
You know, being on location is amazing because, first of all, you're whatever age you are, you have no responsibilities, you're getting paid per diem, you're like money is coming out of where. And it just, repeat the question if you could.
Sure. So I guess, what was it like being on location, reliving that time
Right.
period and everything that sort of comes along with that?
The time period was interesting because when they dressed us in the time period. So it was layers upon layers upon layers upon layers. And then the top thing, and you're wearing, 60 pounds of clothing and boots and stockings, and it's hot as hell. Um, but location lends itself, it becomes an additional character. It's not like, I mean, Charleston was an unbelievable city and fun and great. And to be there and to be shooting it and to know that this stuff sort of happened at that point was pretty incredible. But I think location really helps when you're doing something like that.
Mm.
But again, being young and crazy and running around with Kirstie Alley and Jeannie Francis and having the best times of our lives, it was incredible.
And as we touched on at the start, obviously plenty of guest stars in the show. One of these being Jean Simmons, who was one of
Mm-hmm.
the Hollywood greats, really. And I guess what was it like sort of working with her and spending some time with her? Because obviously, the sort of the two of you, certainly had quite a few scenes together.
Absolutely. She was wonderful. She was so kind and really kept to herself. So you had to really reach out to talk to her. I I was aware of who she was. I had not seen her movies until years later, and I was blown away by her. She's unbelievable, and she was just so kind, so kind.
And in fairness, obviously, you were involved in quite a few sort of different storylines and got to spend a lot of time on camera with the likes of Patrick Swayze, Philip Casnoff, Jim Metzler, Jeannie Francis, Leslie Ann Down, Bill Ostrander. Was there anyone sort of in particular that you really sort of enjoyed working with?
They all were great. I mean, I know I sound a little obnoxious because I'm just like talking about how great it was, but there wasn't a weak link
Right.
in anyone that I worked with.
Mm.
Patrick was very intense, and our scenes were very intense. Um, and he was just so in the moment. And when we had to do a scene, my one of my final scenes where the thing blows up and he slaps me, he asked me if I wanted to be slapped stage or real. And I said, do real because I want a good reaction, you know. He hauled up. I am telling you, that man hit me so hard. I fell over. I went backwards. My hoop skirt went in the air. My legs were dangling. It was like, oh my God. So we did it again, and we got a really good take from that. But everyone really didn't dial it in. They were there for each scene, for everything that we did. There was no bullshit.
And did you kind of all spend time together off camera and off set
Yes.
as well? Because obviously there's a lot of people involved, but it does seem like, everyone sort of did have a lot of fun, being a part of it and making it.
Yeah, I hung out a lot with Kirsty and with Jeannie and with James Reed and with Patrick. And we all would go dancing every night. We would have dinner every night. So we did hang out a lot. Kirsty, Jeannie, and I used to play when we had a day off together. Kirsty brought all of these white nightgowns, these beautiful, like Victorian nightgowns. And we would put them on. We would pretend that we had malaria, which was Jeannie's game that she played when she was a child. And so we pretended like we were sick and we had to order room service and we had to watch movies on TV and we were just dressed in these white Victoria things and we just had a blast.
And what sort of impact did North and South have on your career?
It was pretty big. I mean, my life changed, as a result of it, but I went right into Dynasty.
Right.
And um, it was being on a different level.
Mm. No, of course.
I don't
And
know how to describe it. I mean, I can remember going to a store and trying to buy makeup. And I had the mirror up and I'm doing lipstick. And I see all these people gathering behind me. And I don't know what's going on. I'm like, oh my God, who's here? Who's here? And it was me. And that was like the moment that I was just like blown away.
there's some sort of internet trivia out there, and I'm sure you'll be able to tell me whether it's if there's any truth in it or not. But am I right in saying that you got married in the same wedding gown that your character did in the show, or is that just internet chatter?
I actually got married in one of the skirts that I wore, but not the wedding skirt and not a big hoop.
Mm.
And I bought a different top. It was a Victorian top, but I did wear the skirt and I did actually wear a wig because I had really, really punk short hair. So I wanted to look really pretty. So that's what I did. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. And did you get to keep any sort of props or mementos from the show, or is it just too difficult and you kind of can't get involved?
Well, you're not supposed to, but I took this hat that was in the lavender outfit that I wore when I went back in a buggy to visit my family in Mount Royal. And I wore this grand dress and they were in rags and I wore this grand dress and this hat. And this hat was beautiful. And so I kept it, but I don't know what happened to it. Too
I
many
see.
moves, too many different locations, too many years. I don't know what happened to it.
And obviously, sort of books one and two were filmed and sort of released back to back. Obviously, book three sort of released the best part of a decade later, really. Was that something you were kind of excited or nervous to sort of jump back into? Was it a surprise that there was a third installment in the first place,
Oh
anyway?
yeah. It was a big surprise. I
Mm.
mean, it was like, excuse me. Um, yeah, it was absolutely a huge surprise. I was thrilled to do it, and then I read the script and I wasn't thrilled to do it. I mean, it wasn't very good, but it was fun to see everyone.
I think sort of finally for me, obviously the 40th anniversary of North and South is next year, book one at least. What do you think is sort of the legacy of North and South, and sort of how do you reflect on it all this time later? Because I suppose it seems like the audience that first watched it keep coming back to it, and equally there are sort of new generations that are finding it
Mhm.
as well.
Yeah, I mean, I can't believe it's been 40 years. That is so mind-blowing to me. And as for a legacy, I don't know. I mean, the best thing that I heard from some people was that it got them interested in history and they ended up majoring in history or something like that. And I thought that was really cool. And I
Mm,
loved that. Not a lot of Civil War things
mm,
being done. I sort of liked the idea on Netflix and
mm,
Hulu and Max that they had limited series, and I thought, wow, they can bring back miniseries. They can do these great things, but they're not doing that. They're just doing regular series. But it was on a grand scope. It was grand.
mm.
It absolutely was in every sense of the word,
Mm.
and they don't do that anymore.
And you just touched on it really. And I think when I was speaking to James Reed, he said a similar thing where obviously now you've got streaming, you've got so many channels. But I guess back then, a whole lot less channels, there was no streaming. I guess, the audience was a lot wider in many ways.
Yes,
You must have felt that obviously after you'd filmed it and it was on TV, it must have
absolutely.
taken a whole another level as well.
Oh, I mean, because there was no streaming and there was no Netflix and there was only however 4 channels, 5 channels, whatever. Everybody watched it. Everybody watched it.
Mm.
And yeah, that was pretty cool.
Well, exactly. Um, And I think that was everything I was going to ask, really. But is there anything either you feel I've missed or anything you'd like to add? There might not be, and I appreciate that's putting you on the spot slightly, and it's not meant to. But
That's all right.
any sort of final, I guess, takeaways from obviously, filming the series, and I guess perhaps just what it
Mhm.
means to you.
It was an extraordinary time in my life. I mean, I met my first husband there. I got pregnant with my daughter Molly, who is an actress also, and it changed the course of my life
Mm.
for sure. It really did. It was extraordinary.